Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Leslie Udwin, and I'm the founder and the executive chair of Think Equal, which is a movement and a program which I'm thrilled to be able to present to you briefly today. So first, let me thank you all for joining the call and giving your valuable time to learning about Think Equal. I'm going to talk about the genesis, the purpose, the mission, and the theory of change of the Think Equal movement and program, because it is both of those things and must be in order to achieve results. When you consider the levels of violence and systemic abuse that are so relentless and ubiquitous across our world, I believe it's critical to understand that the disease that we're dealing with is not the violence, it's not the abuse, it's the mindset, it's the discriminatory mindset. And the violence and abuse are merely the symptoms of that disease. And I believe that if we want to prevent this disease, disrupt and stop it, we have to tackle it at its root and not just dive in as we constantly do, lurching from one crisis to the next after the fact, reactively plastering over the wounds. Mindset is the key. Nelson Mandela said, education is the most powerful weapon we have to change the world. Now that makes sense, because how on earth do we change mindset except through education? There is no other way. But there's a real problem in just stopping there. Trump, Weinstein, Epstein, these were all highly educated men who had access to the highest possible degrees of education. But it didn't seem to do much for their mindsets. So what is this education that is this weapon, powerful weapon Mandela spoke of, that changes the world? What did he mean by education? The answer to that question is the key, I'm convinced. So the answer lies in another one of Nelson Mandela's quotes. Not surprising, he was, after all, one of the wisest human beings, giants, to have ever walked the earth. And in this other quote, he says, "No child is born hating another human being because of the color of his skin, his religion, gender, any other factor. A child has to be taught to hate. And if he can be taught to hate, he can be taught to love." So simply put, Think Equal, this movement and program that I lead, was created to teach our children to love, not hate, as simple as that. I began 4 years ago with rigorous research into what is education. This was my key framing question. Who designed it? When? For what purpose? Well, it was designed in and for the Industrial Revolution, the first Industrial Revolution. Its purpose to fill factories. And this purpose, a conveyor belt to the labor market, continues unabated today in our broken education system, which is simply not fit for purpose. Think Equal believes that the most important subject in the world, social and emotional learning, is simply missing from our education system. It's the missing third dimension which must take its place alongside numeracy and literacy if we are to succeed with sustainable development of people and planet. So our mission as Think Equal is to bring that subject front and center as the core purpose of early years education. And we ask, how can it be compulsory if we really care about our young citizens and our children, our vulnerable young children who need tools to succeed in their lives, to have well-being? If we really care about them, how on earth can we deem it to be compulsory for them to learn numeracy and literacy, but it's optional for them to learn how to value another human being? This cannot be optional. Now, why do I say our purpose is to bring social and emotional learning as the core purpose of early years education? And I stress that that is key to Think Equal's theory of change. And that is because neuroscientists are very clear. The foundation has to be built early. Look, 90% of the adult brain is fully formed by the age of 5. Now, this isn't opinion, this is fact. And we are sleepwalking and flying in the face of science constantly, though we purport to be led by science and crave measurement. Sometimes it seems to me that is all we crave, because if we keep looking at something, measuring it from this angle, that angle, up and down, well, we can delay action comfortable. So neuroscientists are clear. To build the foundation for positive outcomes in life, you have to get in before the age of 6. People get irritated and angry with me when I say that. And I very often hear people say, come on, you can't give up on anyone above the age of 6. And I'm not giving up on anyone above 6. All I'm saying is that just as no reasonable architect or competent architect would design a building and start building it from the ground floor up without foundations, how can we be doing this to our children, leaving them without foundations? We need to give them the tools so that they grow up and don't rape, so that they can grow up and not become depressed without knowing how to deal with that. Commit suicide, the #1 killer of young men in the country I live in, the UK, the #1 killer of our young men under 40. Who's meant to give our children these foundations? We leave it to the parents. That is naive and idiotic, frankly, because the parents have not learned this themselves and they are mired in discrimination. They can only pass the discriminations down cyclically from one generation to another, for the most part. So what do we do in Think Equal? We, at the earliest foundational stage, co-construct with our children, experientially, co-construct positive prosocial neuropathways. And we give our children, this is in the very architecture of the developing brain, which then lasts for the rest of that child's life. And we give them the tools to be able to deal with any antisocial behaviors, attitudes, impulses. We create cohesive communities in early years classrooms that then become cohesive communities in the outside world as that child grows into a youth with positive outcomes in his or her life and an adult with positive outcomes. I like to use 2 metaphors when I'm describing Think Equal for the first time to someone. And the first is that I believe Think Equal is like a vaccination. It's a vaccination against violence and discrimination. And I had this metaphor in mind long before COVID came and engulfed us. And I say this because we've designed Think Equal with, by the way, thought leaders and experts throughout the world, giants like Sir Ken Robinson and Dr. Mark Brackett and Dr. Robin Stern, the two co-founders of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, and the brilliant neuroscientist, Professor Richard Davidson, and the extraordinary Vicky Colbert from Colombia, who has democratized and revolutionized rural schools in Colombia, etc. Many great experts on our committee who helped us create these materials. Barbara Isaacs, the president of Montessori Europe, I could go on. But basically, when we designed this, I insisted on it being prescriptive. And this flew in the face of a lot of jargon-led, movements that were so sure of themselves in saying, we can only have, child-led free play. Nothing else works. We can only have, and the bottom line is that would be a great and wonderful luxury to be able to design the education of our young ones in a way that was ideal and idyllic. But we don't have that luxury. Why? Because we have underpaid, undervalued, underrespected our early years teachers for the longest time. We do not have a workforce sufficient unto the task across the world to deal with a new subject that they've never learned, they know nothing about, they don't even understand for the most part what critical thinking means, let alone how to mediate it and what tools to use. So at the outset, as with any vaccination that is trying to tackle a disease, a new disease, you don't say to your doctors and nurses, hey, you decide what to put in here, whatever ingredients you think, bit of bleach, bit of disinfectant. You don't say that. You actually have to have rigorous scientific research into discovering which ingredients are the ones. And you don't say, oh, give as many doses as you like, with whatever frequency and time in between. It has to be prescriptive if you're going to make a dent. And so it is with Think Equal. We have 3 lessons a week over 30 weeks so that it's repetitive, it's consistent, it's comprehensive, and it's continuous. 90 lessons over the academic year in 3 age-appropriate levels. So each year has those 90 lessons, plus 22 to 24 narrative picture books, because that's the only way you can mediate empathy is through narrative and story and character. Can't just wag a finger at a child and say, put yourself in that person's shoes, it's meaningless. So as a result, and this brings me to, and by the way, the ingredients, well, the ingredients are 25 very specific and critically needed competencies and skills that we teach our children from the age of 3. I'm not quite sure how much time I've got left because we had a delayed start, but I'm going to leave out the second metaphor for now in case I'm running out of time. And during the Q&A, Justin, if I finish early, please ask me about the second metaphor. It's a fun one.
As we go for 5 more minutes, so until 22, okay?
Okay, perfect. I will leave out the IKEA analogy. We'll deal with that maybe in the Q&A. But here is a cost-benefit analysis as it pertains in the UK, where I'm based. The most expensive piece of real estate in the UK is a prison cell. It costs £48,000 a year to incarcerate a violent offender. Think Equal can be given to 24,000 children for that price. And how many of those 24,000 will be precluded or stopped rather from growing up to commit violent crimes and be incarcerated at £45,000 a year each? We are insane the way we are handling our crises, is all I can say. That figure speaks for itself. Think Equal will not only lead, and does not only lead, because we are with 94,000 children today in 16 countries in 6 continents, and the stories we get back weekly from teachers about the transformation, the miraculous transformation of our children are so heartening and so extraordinary. So Think Equal not only leads to well-being, mental and physical health, but it takes the strain off, if not substantially, has the power to eliminate all aspects of the cost of violence containment and fallout. It'll positively impact climate change because we teach our children from the age of 3 to protect and love the planet and what to do concretely to achieve a healthy planet. It positively impacts gender equality, gender, racial, and religious violence, and it closes the gaps in all challenges which are impacted by mindset. So in a sense, one can say that prosocial mindset is the new force that we are injecting into the equation. H.G. Wells said, and it was Sir Ken Robinson who left us tragically far, far, far too early, 4 months ago, and was our first and founding patron. And Ken told me this quote, which I think about probably every single day. H.G. Wells said, civilization is a race between education and catastrophe. And I believe that that race can only be won by a certain kind of education, by educating our children in their earliest years with the 25 competencies and skills that we have chosen as the most replete list that we could find after rigorous research. Competencies like empathy and peaceful conflict resolution, emotional literacy, emotional self-regulation, gender equality. We have to teach gender equality to our children because they sure as hell are not getting it from the world around them. They're getting the opposite. Critical thinking, problem solving, mindfulness, self-esteem, environmental awareness, as I've said, and 15 other competencies and skills that we teach. Skills or tools without which they cannot grow to be empathetic and responsible and loving global citizens who contribute positively to people and planet. So I'm going to end now by asking you please to visit our website and get much more detail than I was able to give you in this short time. www.thinkequal.org, O-R-G. And please download and look at the 6 weeks worth of free materials, books and lesson plans and resources that we have given in response to COVID. Although of course we have 270 lesson plans and 80 books, but here at least are 6 parcels of toolkits. And please, pass these on to anyone with young kids under 6. I've told you that we're with 94,000 children to date. This is after 3 years of operating. We started in 2017, our first pilots. And we are about to double. This is how Think Equal works. It is so cheap, replicable, and scalable that we just now keep on building exponentially. So the next move we're making, which is into the Eastern Cape province in South Africa, where we are working with the provincial government to give Think Equal to every single 5-year-old in every reception class in the entire Eastern Cape province. We're not fully funded yet. If you know anybody anybody who cares about South Africa, who might be South African, who wants to help. We have some funding yet to find to close that gap. But if we succeed, and we're only short of $400,000, it's nothing to achieve this, we will have educated within the next 10 years for one-off cost, just an initial cost, direct cost of materials. We're a charity, we don't make money. We will have educated 940,400 children, because in January, we're going out to every 5-year-old, and there are 94,400 of them. So I guess I just want to close with saying, you know, please, please support this movement, support this program, support us in any way you can, to ensure that every child in every classroom in every country in the world learns Think Equal, and at $2 per child in a replicable and scalable program, that shouldn't be too difficult. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening.
Leslie, on behalf of Learnlife and the Relearn Festival, thank you so much. That was powerful, compelling, but equally important for all of our schools and also all of our countries. As the UK lead for 100, I also want to thank you for the work you are doing around the world. And it is such a privilege to be partnering with you at 100 as well. And I know the global team at Finland in Helsinki feel the same about that. So cheering you on. We are going to take some time now for some questions. Leslie, I'm conscious listening to you. Love the passion, the impact. It is so inspiring and it is so important. For teachers who are in a school where there is not a significant amount of progress happening around social and emotional learning and well-being, practically, as well as the Think Equal program, which we want all our listeners to be adopting and supporting as far as possible where they are, where would be a really good place to start to bring about this culture change for people who are teachers, day-to-day teachers inside a school system?
So, Justin, you're not going to be surprised by my answer. You know how obsessed I am. There is only one place to start, at the very, very first classroom in your school. Now, it's much more difficult for teachers in grade 1, standard 1, class 1, you know, we call them different things in different countries, but it's much more difficult once this rigid system of numeracy literacy testing has begun, and the day is cram packed. There's not an inch to maneuver in. Thank God, and actually, I don't know why I say that. I keep saying that. I'm not religious, but thank heavens, thank something, thank goodness, thank the energy of the universe, that neuroscientists have identified the window as being so young, because actually in those classrooms, we have not yet had one teacher come to us and say, we can't fit this in, sorry, you know, we're cram-packed. They're not. We're not at those ages. 3 to 6, we're still open. We're still in, you know, at the oldest of those cohorts, the 5-year-olds, which is, you know, we're starting in South Africa, having done 2 very strong pilots with the ECD sectors, 3 to 4, we realized there's such a chaos in that system in South Africa. Systematized free public education begins at 5 in South Africa. So we're not messing about with the, you know, the younger ones who will reach that classroom of the 5-year-olds, but let's start there and make sure they don't escape the net. Even in those classrooms, which are under the Ministry of Education and not the Department of Social Security, even in those classrooms, they are basically looking at school readiness. What we're doing is school readiness. How can you possibly learn without knowing how to tackle your anxiety, your fears, your angers, your, you know, and of course it's life readiness. So what should teachers do? quite simply sign up to Think Equal. If your school can afford £220 per classroom in the UK, that is what it costs to print up everything and to give everything and to train, to give all the materials, to support for 1 year, because we won't just shove a bunch of materials onto our teachers and send them off. You know, we'll be with them for 1 year. And all of that costs £220 per classroom. That's a one-off cost. You don't have to pay that again the following year, because now you're trained, you have the materials, you just keep using these materials. And, you know, look, these materials are incredibly hardy. Here is one book, I Love My Planet. You know, look, it's hardy, it's strong. This comes out 1 week in a year, and then it goes into the cupboard and waits for the following year's cohort. It's easy. I mean, just tell us that you want to, it's a little trickier in developing countries, may I say, and I hate this thing of developed. I don't believe there's a single developed country in this world, I really don't. But in the so-called developing countries, it's a little trickier, because I'm religious about saying that I will not allow teachers and schools to pay for this. This has to be provided to them. This is actually the government's responsibility. And because governments don't often stand up to their responsibility, I find myself working 18 hours a day, every day, 7 days a week, trying to raise the money from philanthropists and those who care and have, in order to pay to sponsor those schools and teachers, because the children have the right to this. And we cannot start another system of inequality where rich schools will do it and poor schools won't. Yeah. What a long answer to a very short question. And I must beg forgiveness.
Wonderful.
My last engagement with wonderful people who care finished at 4 a.m. With, I think there were 210 people in the sort of webinar in Canada, in Edmonton. And so I'm a little bleary-eyed and my brains are a little bit addled.
Well, thank you, Leslie, for that answer and that response. So for all the people who are listening, who are obviously, you know, this talk will be going out as a resource for you. So when you do listen to this talk, we would really encourage you to use the Think Equal resources in your schools, home learning, whatever learning system, ecosystem you're in. We want to see as many people as possible benefiting from these resources and the children being transformed by them.
Justin, may I just say, I've just seen a question from Daniela Bayerle.
Read it out.
Is there any chance to get your material in German as well? Now, we are in 14 languages, and we're in some countries, we're in all languages. So in North Macedonia, we're in Macedonian and Albanian. In Sri Lanka, we're in Sinhala and Tamil. We have some major languages, Spanish, French, Portuguese, sadly, not yet German, because there hasn't been a glimmer of interest, I'm sorry to say, from Germany yet. So we haven't had cause to. Daniela, please reach out to me. I am now putting into the chat.
Leslie, we've lost your sound slightly, just so you know. So, oh, you're back again. We've got you back. Carry on.
Okay. Well, I was just saying that unfortunately we're not yet in German, but we are in many other languages. But Daniela, please reach out to me. I'm putting my email ID right now into the chat.
Brilliant. Thank you, Leslie.
And anyone feel free to reach out to me. Why don't we talk about how we start getting this translated into German and bring it to Germany? That would be wonderful.
I was going to say that's going to be a great outcome from this session. So please do share that across your networks. It'd be great to see this translated into German, but also whichever nationality or nation you are in when you're listening to this, please do also consider reaching out to Leslie to see if your nation can help translate Think Equal resources, so that this session could be a catalyst for new languages and for new nations to be accessing this to change children's lives and our futures. But it's also the transformation of our future generations, because as we change through neuroscience, we change our approaches, we adopt a more transformational approach. We're not just changing individuals' lives, we're changing families, we're changing communities, we're changing societies, and we are changing our nation. So Leslie, just last thought together for our Q&A. So we know that you live and bleed Think Equal. In terms of system transformation, we really do need to see change happen at scale, like you were saying. We believe in that at 100. And Ken Robinson said that real social change, I love that you shared that he was a patron for Think Equal, which I know, which says so much about Ken Robinson, but also so much about you and your team and the value of your work. Ken said that real social change really only happens at grassroots. And so we are seeing change happen from the margins towards the mainstream over time with events like this, with Learnlife, the Barcelona Hub, 100, many springing up around the world from the margins to the mainstream. That said, what would be your advice to our listeners for those who would like to see system change also happening at a policy and a government systemic level, so we can see systems in nations change as well? So what are your last thoughts on that, the policy level change?
Well, I think what I'd like to do is just describe to you what happened in the country of Belize, because by actually giving you a case study that has achieved system change, this is our first country to mandate Think Equal, which is what we are actually asking for. Mandate it, we say, alongside numeracy and literacy. So, as part of the coalition of 21st century skills, sorry, I always, when I say that, pause to giggle mentally, because really, we didn't need it in any other century. 21st century skills. Okay, sorry. We're part of, however, a coalition of 21st century skills for the Inter-American Development Bank, who are funding our work, thank heavens, in Colombia.
Wonderful.
With the extraordinary Fundación Escuela Nueva as our partners, Vicky Colbert, amazing NGO. Their work is spectacular. Anyway, I go to Panama to do a keynote speech for the IADB's Coalition on 21st Century Skills, and education ministers and policymakers, teachers from Latin America pretty much are present. And in the audience is one extraordinary woman called Deborah Domingo, who turns out to be the education minister of Belize. And after the speech, she comes up to me and she says, that has actually really blown me away. And I'm very interested in looking at this program with a view to bringing it to Belize.
Wonderful.
So we started conversations. We started sending her samples of the work. We started engaging. Within 6 weeks, Deborah said, this is it. I am bringing this to every single child in Belize between the ages of 3 and 6. And not only that, I'm mandating it. So we are literally now about to go and train. At the end of November, we are training every single early years teacher in Belize. Look, it's not that big a country, but it's an entire country. This is system change, policy change, as it should work. And in that particular case, it didn't come from the grassroots in its inception, but it sure as hell is going to come from the grassroots in its execution and implementation. And that is how the system will sustain it, because once teachers have these tools, and teachers are so busy and so pressured, you know, when they get the tools in their hands, they're thrilled to bits that great minds have sat and worked on these tools and put together. You know, Ken has written one of our books. I mean, what a luxury as an early years teacher to have this extraordinary, valuable toolkit, practical toolkit. Who wouldn't want that? So once you have it, you sure as hell are not going to let go of it. And that is how it will then be embedded as a sustainable system change, not just a policy that was made this year and gets abandoned when the election changes the minister or whatever happens, you know?
Yeah.
So that's the best answer I can give you, is one example of how it's happened.
Well, that's an amazing example, and we're looking forward to many more case studies and examples, Leslie, in the future, with other nations seeing similar system transformation. Just want to end before we say thank you and goodbye to Leslie, to also just highlight for all of you who are listening, Sir Harry Burns. He was the Chief Medical Officer for Scotland. You can check that out on YouTube. There's some superb talks there on the neuroscience side. When he presented this research to a senior government minister, the minister said, "This is the most inspirational and transformational vision for reform for education I've ever seen in my decades in government." So the work that Leslie is talking about, the neuroscience, the impact, this is all evidence-based, and it is also the future of learning. Social emotional learning is key to who we are, because we know we're not thinking beings, we're actually feeling beings as humans who think, but the system has it the other way around. So on that note, Leslie, thank you for the work that you and your incredible team are doing at Think Equal. Please share the website one last time, Leslie, as we go. And I'll read that out as you put that into the chat. So you can contact.
Thank you so much, Justin. And thank you to 100, I must say, an extraordinary convening organization who we are so humbled and honored to have been chosen this year as one of their 100 global innovations in education.
Thank you. Well, we're super excited about you and your work and your future, and the 2021 Global Collection from 100. So the website as we end now is www.thinkequal.org. You can also contact Leslie and her team at leslie.udwin, that's LESLEE.UDWIN at thinkequal.org. Thank you for listening to this message. Please act on it. And Leslie, thank you so much, and we're cheering you on.
And Daniela has just written such a lovely comment. I have to end by saying, Daniela, vielen Dank, Schatz, in my meager German.
Wonderful. Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you so much,
Goodbye, everybody. Wonderful.
Speak
Thanks.